I work hard, I keep to myself, and I follow the rules, yet somehow, that wasn't enough to stop Olivia from barging into my life, my property, and my peace. She trespassed into my garage, dismissed every boundary, and weaponized the HOA like her personal army. And when I fought back legally and respectfully, I was the villain in her eyes. The audacity. The entitlement. The absolute nerve. It's infuriating how some people think rules only apply to others. My name's Paul, and if there's one thing I value above all else, it's peace. Not the kind you find on a yoga mat or a meditation app, but the kind that comes from a quiet home, good coffee, and uninterrupted hours of coding in my backyard garage turned office. I'm a software developer who works from home, which means my sanity hinges on silence, structure, and a decent internet connection. I bought this house 3 years ago, a modest place in a sleepy suburban neighborhood with just enough charm and just the right amount of distance from nosy neighbors. Or so I thought. I poured my heart into converting the detached garage into my dream workspace. Permits? Check. Wiring? Check. Mini fridge for emergency cold brews? Absolutely. Everything was in order, until Olivia moved in. She arrived like a gust of wind, loud, opinionated, and instantly determined to become the unofficial queen of the HOA. From the moment she complained about my driveway layout, which hadn't changed in years, I had a feeling she'd be trouble. I didn't know how right I was. You see, I'm not the confrontational type, but everyone has a limit. And Olivia? She was about to find out exactly where mine was. It started with a note. Not the kind that kindly asks you to bring in your trash bins or mentions a block party. No, this one had the icy tone of someone who enjoys control for the sake of it. Olivia, my brand new neighbor, had left a neatly folded letter under my doormat with the HOA letterhead printed in bold. Unapproved vegetation spotted along driveway, it read. Translation. She didn't like my succulents. I blinked, rereading the line, then glanced at the modest, low-maintenance plants I'd carefully arranged, plants I'd seen in at least 4 other yards. I was stunned, then irritated. But I shrugged it off, thinking it was a one-time overstep. That was my first mistake. Over the next 2 weeks, I received 2 more notices, one for leaving my trash bin out beyond the acceptable retrieval window, by an hour, and another for parking inappropriately, even though my car was parked fully within my own driveway. It was death by 1,000 paper cuts. I tried reasoning with her, but Olivia's responses were always wrapped in condescension. You may not be familiar with how this neighborhood runs, she said with a tight smile, but I like to keep things orderly. She wasn't a president of the HOA, just a board member. But she wielded those bylaws like a sword, cutting down anyone who stepped an inch out of line, especially me. I started dreading trips to the mailbox, knowing there might be another petty citation waiting for me. My calm, focused workdays were now interrupted by this growing tension. What began as simple frustration quickly boiled into outrage. Who was she to decide what peace looked like on my property? I'd followed every rule when building my garage office, every regulation for landscaping, every parking guideline. Olivia, though, had made it clear, my peace wasn't hers to allow. And the worst part? I hadn't seen anything yet. This wasn't just nitpicking. It was targeted. And something told me she was only getting started. I'm not the kind of person who picks fights. I like clean lines, logical outcomes, and respectful distance, the kind of peace you earn after years of busting your back to build a life you actually want to live in. That's why when Olivia's SUV blocked my driveway for the first time, I told myself maybe it was just a mistake. Maybe she had visitors. Maybe the rainstorm had forced her to pull into the nearest space, which just happened to be mine. But then it happened again. And again. Each time, more brazen than the last. I'd wake up, grab my coffee, stretch by the window, and there it would be, her sleek silver SUV parked diagonally across my driveway like it paid rent. No note. No apology. Just entitlement on 4 wheels. I tried to handle it maturely. I left a polite note under her windshield. Hi. This is my private driveway. Please don't park here again. The next morning, I found the note ripped in half and tossed onto my lawn like yesterday's junk mail. That was the first time my stomach knotted up in that specific, helpless kind of way that comes when you realize someone's disrespecting you not by accident, but on purpose. I walked over to her place that afternoon, knocked, and when she opened the door, her expression was as bright and fake as a plastic daisy. "Oh Paul, what a surprise," she chirped. "Everything okay?" "Actually," I said, as evenly as I could manage, "your car's been blocking my driveway." "Again?" She blinked, then smiled. "Ah, yes. I had a delivery, and the street was full. I figured you wouldn't mind. You weren't even using it." "That's not the point," I said, trying not to clench my fists. "It's private property." She waved a hand, dismissing me like I was a leaf in the wind. "Oh, Paul. We're neighbors. Let's not make this into a federal case." And that's when it clicked. Olivia didn't just think she was allowed to ignore boundaries, she thought she was the boundary. Her rules. Her preferences. Her world. Everyone else was just living in it. I walked home, jaw tight, the image of her smug face seared into my brain. This wasn't over. Not even close. Something told me that SUV was the opening act, and Olivia had a whole performance planned. It started with a sound. A soft click, like a latch settling into place, just as I was shutting down for the night. At first, I thought it was nothing, maybe the wind rattling the fence gate, maybe a neighbor's pet brushing up against something. But something in me prickled. You know that ancient instinct, the kind that makes the hair on your arms stand at attention when something isn't quite right? That's exactly what hit me. I paused, my finger hovering over my keyboard's shutdown icon, and listened. Silence. Then, a soft shuffle. I moved to the window, careful not to cast a shadow against the curtain. Outside, the streetlights glowed amber, and everything seemed still. Too still. I opened the front door quietly and stepped onto my porch, scanning my driveway, my lawn, the sidewalk. Empty. But when I turned toward the side of my house, toward the converted garage I'd spent months turning into my dream office, my heart gave a little jolt. The side door to the garage was ajar. I hadn't left it that way. I never leave it that way. I crept toward it, barefoot on concrete, each step deliberate, silent. The anticipation coiled in my chest like a spring. My garage, my sacred space, violated. I stopped just before the door and listened. Nothing. Then a clink. Metallic. A small grunt. My pulse surged. Someone was inside. I grabbed my phone and turned on the camera, angling it just enough to peek into the garage without exposing myself. What I saw made my blood boil. Olivia. In leggings and a puffy jacket. Flashlight clenched between her teeth like she was exploring a tomb. Fumbling around my workspace, poking at shelves, peeking behind my rolling chair. I watched, stunned, as she calmly walked past my drafting table, phone in hand, snapping pictures like she had every right to be there. I backed up slowly and called the non-emergency line. No need for drama, yet. But as I waited for dispatch, I recorded everything from a safer angle. My own neighbor, trespassing at night, no explanation, no invitation. The suspense churned in my gut. What was she looking for? Proof to use against me? Or had she really come to reclaim what she felt entitled to, my garage? Whatever it was, one thing was certain, this was no misunderstanding. This was a declaration. And I was officially done playing nice. The morning after Olivia's midnight garage expedition, I sat at my desk staring blankly at my computer screen, unable to focus. Coffee in hand, I kept replaying the footage I'd captured, frame by frame, Olivia slinking through my private office like a thief in heels. I didn't sleep much. Every creak and gust of wind kept me on edge. What would she do next? Leave another fake HOA notice on my door? Pretend it never happened? I expected an apology at the very least. Instead, I got escalation. That afternoon, a letter appeared in my mailbox. Not from the city. Not from the actual HOA. No, this was hand-delivered, slipped in without postage, signature cursive across the envelope like it was a wedding invitation. I opened it carefully. Inside was a single page, notice of code violation, unauthorized use of garage for non-parking purposes. And at the bottom, signed in swooping ink, Olivia Westfield, HOA board member. My blood simmered. She was trying to punish me for her own trespassing. I flipped through the HOA manual, now practically dog-eared from all the times I'd referenced it, and there was no clause against converting a garage, especially not with permits. I had them all on file. Yet Olivia had fabricated this violation from thin air. And just like that, my garage became a battleground. Not just physical, but bureaucratic. Neighbors began whispering. Some avoided eye contact when walking by. Others gave me sympathetic nods. Olivia, meanwhile, strutted through the neighborhood like a sheriff with a badge no one asked for. At the next HOA meeting, she smugly introduced a new agenda item, enforcement of traditional property usage standards. Translation: she was going to undo my office space. But if Olivia thought she could erase my hard work with a signature and a clipboard, she was sorely mistaken. She'd drawn the first lines of a war she wasn't ready for. And I was already gathering my arsenal, documents, footage, and a resolve that no entitled neighbor could shake loose. I wasn't the type to look for a fight, but Olivia had declared one, and now it was time for justice. She wanted to turn her trespassing into a power move, masking her intrusion behind a veil of bureaucracy. But I wasn't some oblivious homeowner she could push around. No, I'm Paul, and while I might be soft-spoken, I'm not spineless. After she slapped me with that bogus garage violation, I dug in like a man with something to prove, not just for myself, but for everyone in the neighborhood too afraid to speak up. I spent the next 2 nights pulling together every piece of paperwork I had. Permits. Photos. HOA bylaws. Olivia might have a fancy title on the board, but I had something stronger, proof. And a deep-seated sense of being done with her nonsense. I even went as far as calling the city planning office and got an official statement verifying that my garage conversion was fully legal. The clerk on the phone chuckled when I explained that the violation, said I wasn't the first person to call about an overzealous HOA board member. That gave me hope. At the next HOA meeting, I arrived early, armed with a binder full of documentation and a digital projector under my arm. Olivia was already seated at the front of the room, arms crossed, chin high, like a judge awaiting sentencing. But this time, the gavel was mine. When it was my turn to speak, I calmly walked to the front, connected my laptop, and laid it all out. Photos of her car in my garage, twice. Screenshots of text messages. Footage from my security cam showing her entering without permission. And finally, my permits. Everything legal. Everything clean. The silence in the room was thunderous. Then I turned to face Olivia. Not only did you trespass, Olivia, I said, voice steady, but you weaponized your position on the board to fabricate violations in retaliation. That's not leadership. That's abuse of power. A murmur rippled through the crowd. And in that moment, standing under the fluorescent lights with a community watching, I felt something shift. I wasn't just defending my space anymore. I was claiming it. My voice. My rights. My home. Olivia had used fear to build her kingdom. I'd just torn it down with facts. Empowerment never tasted so sweet. After the HOA meeting, the silence from Olivia's side was deafening. But I knew better than to think she was done. No, people like Olivia don't retreat, they regroup. I gave her a week. A week of blissful, unblocked mornings and calm evenings working in my garage office. I dared to hope. Maybe I'd finally earn some peace. But then, like clockwork, the games began again. It started with a neighborly tip left anonymously in my mailbox. My garbage bins were apparently 2 inches too far from the curb. Next came a citation, yes, a citation, for the unsightly color of my backyard shed. I'd painted it muted slate gray, but according to Olivia, it clashed with the visual tone of the block. I couldn't help but laugh. The woman who trespassed into my garage twice was now acting as the self-appointed fashion police for backyard structures. But the worst came on a rainy Thursday. I'd left for a dentist appointment and returned to find my driveway completely blocked. Not just Olivia's SUV, but a second vehicle I didn't recognize. One behind the other. No room for my car, and definitely no way for my dad, who was visiting that week and needed a walker, to get inside without stepping into the mud. That was the final straw. I didn't knock. I didn't write notes. I took pictures. License plates, timestamps, wide shots. Then I called the tow company. Again. The drivers, already familiar with the situation, got to work like it was routine. Within 20 minutes, both cars were gone. I stood under the overhang, arms folded, watching like a sentry defending his castle. No anger. No gloating. Just cold, precise follow-through. That evening, Olivia didn't scream. She didn't even knock. Instead, she paced outside, phone glued to her ear, no doubt plotting her next move. But I could see the cracks forming. She wasn't angry anymore. She was losing control. And the realization that her intimidation tactics no longer worked. That was a win I savored in silence. The turning point came not with a bang, but with a petition. Olivia, now cornered and desperate to reclaim her power, went door to door with a clipboard in hand, petitioning to have me removed from the neighborhood for creating a hostile environment. The irony nearly knocked me over. The woman who had trespassed into my garage, blocked my driveway multiple times, and used the HOA as a weapon now had the audacity to act like she was the victim. But poetic justice has a way of showing up when you least expect it, and often with a smile. Unbeknownst to Olivia, her crusade ignited a different kind of fire in the community. One by one, neighbors who had stayed silent for too long began speaking up. First came Lenny from 2 houses down, who revealed Olivia had reported his garden gnome as threatening decor. Then Mrs. Holloway admitted Olivia threatened to fine her over a slightly tilted mailbox post. Even the single mom on the corner, who rarely engaged with anyone, shared how Olivia called child services over a few toys left in her front yard. Within 48 hours, a counter-petition began circulating, this one demanding Olivia be removed from the HOA board altogether. At the next emergency meeting, the room was packed. Olivia walked in with her signature icy smirk, completely unaware she was walking into her own political funeral. I presented video footage, documented complaints, and a timeline of her escalating behavior. Then others followed. Story after story. Receipt after receipt. The final blow came when the board president read aloud the total number of signatures against her. It wasn't even close. A unanimous vote. Olivia was stripped of her title. She didn't say a word as she left the meeting, head high, but eyes glassy. And for once, I didn't feel anger. Just closure. She had played her hand too many times and finally lost the game on the very board she once ruled. That, to me, was the purest form of vindication. The fallout from Olivia's downfall didn't just fade quietly into the background, it rippled through the neighborhood like a thunderclap. Suddenly, fences were being mended, both literally and figuratively. I began receiving quiet knocks at my door from neighbors I'd barely spoken to before, people who had kept their heads down during Olivia's reign, now stepping forward with their own stories of intimidation and petty power trips. One woman, Clara, told me she'd been fined for her wind chimes being too whimsical. Another, an elderly man named Jerome, revealed he'd paid over $500 in accumulated fees simply because Olivia didn't like the color of his garden shed. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like a man defending his castle, I felt like a neighbor among neighbors. There was an unspoken understanding, we had all endured the same storm, and now, we were patching the roof together. Meanwhile, Olivia had vanished from the public eye. Her once daily patrols around the block, her stiff smile during HOA meetings, gone. Her home, once the unofficial HOA headquarters, now looked still, as if it too was licking its wounds. I spotted her car only once in that time, pulling into the driveway under the cover of twilight, like a queen returning to a kingdom that no longer bowed. But I wasn't resting. While the air had cleared, I knew complacency was dangerous. I documented every interaction, archived every HOA correspondence, and even updated my garage's security system. I wasn't waiting for another intrusion, I was preparing, quietly, with purpose. And while I didn't wish her ill, I did hope she was finally starting to realize what it meant to live in a community, not a dictatorship. Because that's what this moment was, the slow, quiet inhale after a storm. A neighborhood reclaiming its voice. A man who just wanted peace, finally starting to believe he might have it. The morning Olivia's house hit the market, I stood at the edge of my driveway, coffee in hand, watching a realtor stake the "for sale" sign into her pristine front lawn. There was a quiet poetry to it. The woman who once ruled this neighborhood with a passive-aggressive iron fist, who scribbled citations over minor lawn decor and claimed dominion over my private garage, was leaving. Voluntarily or not, I didn't care. Her exodus felt like the final chapter in a long, exhausting novel. Neighbors emerged from their homes like survivors blinking into the sunlight. Some nodded to me with an unspoken "thank you," others offered warm handshakes or even celebratory waves. I didn't expect a parade, but the small affirmations felt like a standing ovation. One neighbor, Ms. Rivera, a retired schoolteacher, dropped off a tray of lemon bars with a note, for standing up when the rest of us were tired of kneeling. And the best part? The new HOA board, freshly purged of Olivia's loyalists, passed a unanimous vote to formally amend the bylaws, making it explicitly clear that private property, including garages and driveways, could never be used or occupied without written permission. They even named it the Paul Amendment. That's right. My name was now enshrined in HOA history. Later that week, a local reporter reached out after catching wind of the drama through neighborhood chatter. I hesitated at first, but something about sharing the story, on my terms, felt right. The article ran under the headline, "Homeowner Outwits HOA Tyrant, A Lesson in Boundaries and Backbone." The comments section exploded with support, people from all over applauding the way I handled things, lawfully, cleverly, and with just the right amount of sass. Vindication wasn't loud. It was a sigh of relief. A crackling steak on the grill without a complaint. A driveway untouched. Peace. Hard-earned. Long overdue. Mine. With Olivia gone and her house sitting empty, you'd think the neighborhood would return to its peaceful rhythm, but nope, that's not how this story ends. The aftermath of her dramatic exit left behind a strange silence, almost eerie. For weeks, her pristine yard sat untouched, and a rotating cast of curious potential buyers wandered through, eyeing the property like it was cursed. And maybe it was, in a way. Her reputation clung to the house like mildew. Some neighbors joked it was haunted, not with ghosts, but with bad energy and petty rule enforcement. Meanwhile, I took stock of my own life. My garage office, once invaded and disrespected, was now sacred ground. I installed a backup keypad lock, updated my security cameras, and even added a motion sensor light that triggered a soft chime inside the house every time someone got too close. Was it a little overkill? Maybe. But after everything I'd been through, that small ding gave me peace of mind. I also found myself connecting more with neighbors, the ones who had been too intimidated to speak up during Olivia's reign. Conversations bloomed over mailboxes and driveway edges. We shared stories, laughs, and, in some cases, apologies for not speaking up sooner. No hard feelings, I told them. Sometimes it just takes one person to draw the line in the sand so others can step over it too. One Saturday afternoon, I hosted a small get-together. Nothing fancy, just lemonade, cookies, and a Bluetooth speaker playing some mellow jazz. A few families stopped by, some retirees, even a teenager who admitted he always thought that garage guy was a legend. We laughed, we reminisced, and for the first time since buying this house, I felt like I belonged here. Not just as a resident, but as part of a community learning how to breathe freely again. Olivia's reign had fractured us. Her absence gave us the space to mend. In the weeks after Olivia's departure, something unexpected began to blossom: community. Not the performative kind, where neighbors wave from across lawns and gossip behind hedges, but something deeper. Real. It started small. Mrs. Langston next door baked a loaf of banana bread and left it on my porch with a note that simply read, "Thank you for standing up." A few days later, Roger, usually the grumpy guy who never waved, invited me to help him repaint his mailbox. Even the neighborhood teens, who once darted past my driveway with earbuds in, slowed down to ask if they could check out the famous garage. Then came the potluck. The new HOA board, made up of residents who'd long stayed silent under Olivia's rule, organized it as a way to reintroduce the community. We brought folding chairs and casseroles, stories and open hearts. No one brought up the drama directly, no need. The shared relief was unspoken but tangible, like we'd all exhaled together. I even brought out a slideshow on my laptop, showing how I'd built the office, the improvements I made, and yes, even a redacted version of the infamous SUV incident. People laughed, clapped, and leaned in. That night, under strings of warm patio lights, we weren't just neighbors, we were a neighborhood. United not by proximity, but by experience. By the choice to finally stand together, to say no more to pettiness, control, and fear. We'd faced a storm, and come out better for it. Victory didn't just belong to me. It belonged to all of us.